The elevators chimed at precisely 11 p.m., echoing through the quiet glass corridors of Henderson & Co., one of Chicago's most powerful law firms. The building slept, its conference tables cleared, its screens dark, its executives long gone. Only the hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic squeak of a mop disturbed the silence. That was his rhythm. Malcolm Green, 45, tall, steady, invisible. Every night for 7 years, he had cleaned the same offices, the same hallways, the same glass walls that reflected other people's dreams. His name wasn't on any door. He didn't own a suit or a title, but he had a routine, a quiet dignity, and an old radio that played soul music from the corner of his cleaning cart. To everyone else, he was background, part of the building like the lights or the air conditioning. But to him, every room told a story. He knew who left coffee stains from too many meetings, who cried silently in their cubicle, who stayed too late chasing something they could never catch. And then there was her, Evelyn Carter, the youngest partner the firm had ever promoted, polished, brilliant, and always the last to leave. She wore ambition like perfume, subtle, expensive, impossible to ignore. To most people, she was untouchable, but Malcolm had seen her humanity. The way her hands trembled when she read late-night emails, the quiet sighs she released when she thought no one was around. He had cleaned her office every night for years, yet they had barely exchanged more than polite greetings, until the night the power went out. The night everything changed, it was a stormy Wednesday in November. Rain beat against the skyscraper windows like restless fingers. Evelyn sat hunched over a pile of case files when suddenly, the building went dark. The silence that followed was thick, almost eerie. Then a faint beam of light appeared from the hallway. Malcolm's flashlight. "Ma'am?" His deep voice carried calm through the darkness. "You all right in there?" Evelyn startled. "Oh, yes, I didn't expect anyone." He chuckled softly. "That makes 2 of us. Looks like we're the last ones standing." She smiled faintly, something in his voice easing her tension. He found a candle from his supply cart, lit it, and placed it on her desk. The glow softened her face, melting the layers of professionalism she wore. For the first time, she saw him, not the uniform, not the broom, but the man. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "No problem. Storm will pass soon. Always does." And though the lights came back within minutes, the silence that followed wasn't the same. Something small had shifted, the start of a conversation neither of them expected. The quiet connection over the next few weeks. She began to notice him, the way he hummed to old Marvin Gaye songs while wiping down desks, the way he moved with quiet precision. "Mr. Green," she greeted one night, lingering by her desk. He smiled. "You can call me Malcolm, ma'am. I think we're past formalities at this point." She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that came from surprise. "Then you can call me Evelyn." After that, they started talking, a few words here and there, slowly building into longer conversations. She learned that he had once studied architecture, but had dropped out of college when his mother got sick. He'd worked whatever jobs he could to pay her medical bills. When Evelyn asked if he ever thought of going back, he simply said, "Sometimes." But life doesn't always give you do-overs. The word stuck with her. 3. Reflections at midnight one snowy December night. She returned to the office to find Malcolm sketching something on a scrap piece of paper. "What's that?" she asked. He tried to hide it, embarrassed. "Just a habit. Keeps my hands busy." She reached for the paper. It was a beautiful drawing. A community park surrounded by small brick buildings, sunlight breaking through tall oak trees. "This is incredible," she whispered. He shrugged. "Just lines and dreams, ma'am." "Lines and dreams are how cities are built," she replied. For the first time, Malcolm blushed. That night she stayed late, not for work, but for conversation. They talked about everything: books, loss, hope, how people underestimate kindness. The hours slipped by unnoticed. When she finally left, she looked back through the glass wall. He was still there, humming softly, the candlelight from the power outage now replaced by the city's glow, and Evelyn realized something she hadn't felt in years: peace. 4. The moment that broke the silence. January arrived with bitter cold. One night, Evelyn walked into her office and found Malcolm sitting quietly, head in his hands. "You okay?" she asked. He looked up quickly, wiping his eyes. "Sorry, didn't mean to. I'll get back to work." She closed the door gently. "Talk to me." It took him a moment, but the words came. His mother had passed away that morning. He'd come to work anyway. Evelyn's throat tightened. Without thinking, she crossed the room and put a hand on his shoulder. "You shouldn't be here. Go home, Malcolm." He shook his head. Home's too quiet, so she sat with him. Two people from different worlds. A woman with power. A man who cleaned around it, sharing silence, loss, and humanity. That night, either was alone, a chance she could give weeks later. Evelyn was invited to spearhead a new community development initiative through the firm, renovating a series of abandoned buildings into youth centers across Chicago's South Side. She immediately thought of Malcolm's sketch. When she found him that night, she held out the project file. "I need someone to help design these spaces. Someone who understands what they mean to real people." He looked puzzled. "You think that's me?" "I know it's you." He stared at her, stunned. "I clean floors, Evelyn. I'm not—" "You see things other people miss," she interrupted. "You create beauty from brokenness. Isn't that what architecture really is?" For the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. Just tears that came uninvited. The project that changed everything. Over the next several months, they worked side by side. Malcolm spent his nights cleaning and his mornings sketching designs. Evelyn fought the red tape, convinced the board to take a chance, and even arranged for Malcolm to be listed as a junior designer on the project. When the first youth center finally opened, the crowd was massive. Kids ran through the halls, parents cheered. Reporters snapped photos. Evelyn stood at the podium and said, "This project began because one man reminded me that greatness doesn't come from titles or degrees. It comes from heart." The applause was thunderous. But the real moment came later, when she found Malcolm standing outside, staring at the building he'd helped create. She walked up beside him. "So," she said softly, "do you think we could start right here?" He turned to her, eyes glistening. "Start what?" "Something new," she whispered. "A friendship, a future." "Maybe both," he smiled. That slow, humble smile she'd come to love. "I think we already have." Seventh. What love builds in time, their bond grew beyond the walls of Henderson & Co. They shared dinners, walks, laughter that carried through empty streets. People talked. Of course they did. But neither of them cared. To Evelyn, he was not her janitor. He was the man who taught her to see beyond surface and status. To Malcolm, she wasn't his boss. She was the woman who believed he could dream again. When the second youth center opened, they named it the Hayes Carter Foundation. It became a symbol of what compassion could build. When someone chooses to see another not for what they do, but for who they are. Epilogue. The light that never went out years later. Evelyn's office still stood on the 32nd floor, but it was different now. A framed sketch hung on the wall, the first park Malcolm had ever drawn. And every evening, just before she turned off the lights, she'd whisper a quiet thank you to the man who cleaned her office and changed her life. Down the street, in a bustling neighborhood center full of laughter and light, Malcolm taught architecture workshops to children, kids who reminded him of the boy he once was, the one who thought dreams were only for other people. Sometimes Evelyn would visit. She'd stand in the doorway, watching him draw with the same gentle focus that had once filled her office. And when their eyes met, there was always that same unspoken question, and the same quiet, certain answer. The years that followed were quiet, steady, and full of purpose. Malcolm and Evelyn never labeled what they had. It didn't need a name. It was respect. It was love. It was something that grew in the quiet corners of late-night offices and morning coffee cups. Something built not on wealth or status, but on shared humanity. Every Saturday, they met at the youth center on 51st Street, the first one they'd built together. The walls were painted with colors chosen by the children. Sky blue, sunflower yellow, and brick red. The scent of paint had long faded, replaced by laughter and life. Malcolm would sit with groups of kids showing them how to sketch a dream. Not just a building, but a future. His voice was deep and patient, He never told them they couldn't. He just showed them how they could. Evelyn watched from afar, her heart swelling every time she saw his eyes light up when a child understood a new concept. She had fought cases in federal court, given speeches at global conferences. But this was where she felt most alive. The quiet before the storm one crisp autumn evening. The city glowed with golden light as they walked home from the center. Malcolm carried a stack of children's drawings under his arm. Little houses, parks, dreams scribbled in crayon. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked softly. "Not going back to architecture school?" He smiled, shaking his head. "Nah, I'm building things now, just not with concrete. I'm building people." She stopped walking and looked at him, really looked at him. "You always say things like that," she whispered. "Simple words that change how I see everything." Malcolm chuckled. "Guess that's what happens when you've seen both sides of life. The shine and the struggle. You stop trying to sound smart and just tell the truth." Evelyn slipped her arm through his. "And that's why I trust you more than anyone I know." They crossed the street under the orange glow of streetlights, the city humming around them, unaware that two souls were quietly rebuilding the world, one heart at a time. A setback, but life, as it always does, tested them. Months later, Evelyn received devastating news. The law firm was dissolving the community partnership program. The board, driven by profit, saw no financial upside. The youth centers, the scholarships, everything they had built, were in danger of shutting down. She stormed into the boardroom, the same one where her career had once begun. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with fury. "You can't measure worth in dollars," she shouted. "Do you know how many children you're abandoning?" But the room was silent, faces blank, eyes cold. When she walked out, the weight of defeat pressed against her like stone. That night, Malcolm found her sitting in her office, head in her hands, tears glistening under the city lights. He didn't say anything. He just took her hand. "I failed them," she whispered. "No," he said gently. "You taught them. You showed them what hope looks like. That doesn't end because some people lost their way." She looked at him, her heart aching. "What do we do now?" Malcolm smiled softly. "We start again, just like before. the foundation," and so they did. Using their savings, their contacts, and their faith, they founded a non-profit, the Second Light Foundation, named after the candle that had lit Evelyn's desk the night the power went out. They began small. One center, then another, funded through local donors and volunteers. Malcolm handled the designs, Evelyn the legal groundwork. The community rallied around them. People remembered what they had done when no one else cared. Newspapers began to take notice. Headlines read, "Ex-janitor and attorney transform Chicago's South Side. From cleaner to creator. The man who rebuilt hope." But for Malcolm, the truest reward wasn't in the press or the praise. It was in the look on the faces of the children who once had nowhere to go. Every smile was another blueprint. Every laugh was a wall standing strong. Free the day she fell one bitter February night, after giving a speech at the opening of their 5th youth center, Evelyn collapsed. The doctors called it exhaustion. Years of stress, long hours, too little rest. Malcolm stayed by her hospital bed for days, holding her hand, his rough palms trembling as he whispered prayers into the sterile air. When she finally woke, her first words were barely audible. "Did we finish it?" He smiled, tears breaking free. "We did. They're all running, Evelyn. The centers, the kids, they're all okay." She exhaled slowly, her fingers squeezing his. "Promise me you'll keep it going. Even if I can't." He leaned forward, his forehead against hers. "We started this together. We'll finish it together." The gift months later, as Evelyn recovered, Malcolm surprised her. He brought her to a small plot of land, near the first park he had ever drawn, years ago on that scrap of paper. The air was fresh with spring, wildflowers blooming. She looked around, puzzled. "What is this?" He grinned. "Your new office." A modern, sunlit building stood before them. Glass, wood, and open space. Across the entrance was a plaque that read, "The Evelyn Carter Center for Hope, designed by Malcolm Green." Her breath caught. "Malcolm, he shook his head gently. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You saw something worth saving. This is me saying thank you. Tears filled her eyes. No, she whispered. This is us. We built this together. And then, for the first time in their years of partnership, without words, without hesitation, she reached for his hand, and he didn't let go. Key's legacy 10 years later. The foundation had grown into a nationwide movement. Over 50 centers across the country, each one bearing the same motto engraved above the door. Start right here. Evelyn retired from law to focus full-time on community work. Malcolm became a mentor to hundreds of young architects, many from backgrounds like his. They traveled together, spoke together, and built together, living proof that kindness once planted could outlive everything. And when they were finally asked in an interview for a national documentary what made them start all this, Malcolm smiled that same humble smile. It started with a mop and a late-night light, he said. But really, it started with someone choosing to see me. Evelyn turned to him and whispered, and it grew because you never stopped believing. The final scene years later, long after Evelyn had passed peacefully, Malcolm stood at the park they had designed together. Children ran past, laughter echoing through the air. He leaned against a bench, the plaque beneath his hands warm from the sun. A young boy approached him, dark skin, bright eyes, a sketchbook under his arm. Mr. Green, the boy said, I drew something. Will you look? Malcolm smiled, taking the page. It was a drawing of two people standing in front of a building, holding hands, smiling at a rising sun. He felt tears welling up. That's beautiful, he said softly. Do you know what that sun means? The boy shook his head. It means a new beginning, Malcolm said, and you can start it right here. As the boy ran off, Malcolm sat quietly, eyes drifting toward the horizon. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the city he had once cleaned, the city he had helped rebuild, one act of kindness at a time. And as the wind whispered through the trees, he could almost hear her voice again, gentle and sure. The light that never went out, the world had changed. Years had passed since Malcolm Green's quiet death, but his name lived on, not in history books or television documentaries, but in the whispers of classrooms, the smiles of children, and the murals that colored forgotten neighborhoods. Across the country, the Second Light Foundation had grown into a movement of its own. Volunteers, teachers, architects, and dreamers carried the torch that Malcolm and Evelyn had lit so many years ago. On the anniversary of the foundation's creation, thousands gathered in Chicago, the city where it all began. The young woman in the portrait at the entrance of the main hall stood a young woman, brown-skinned, bright-eyed, holding a small envelope. Her name was Aaliyah Carter Green, Malcolm's granddaughter. She had only known him through stories, the way he smiled, the roughness of his hands, the way he always said, "Start right here." Aaliyah had grown up surrounded by his legacy, but she wanted to know the man behind it, the janitor who became an architect of hope. Inside the hall, a massive portrait hung above the stage, Malcolm and Evelyn standing side by side, sunlight washing over them. Below it, etched into marble, were his words, "We rise by lifting others, and it starts right here," the crowd murmured as Aaliyah stepped up to the microphone. She took a shaky breath, holding back tears. "I never met my grandfather," she began, her voice trembling. "But every time someone smiles because of a school he built, or a child gets to dream because of this foundation, I feel like I know him." She paused, glancing at the portrait. People say he cleaned offices, but I think what he really cleaned was the way people saw the world. The audience fell silent. Even the air seemed to still. Then, from the crowd, a man in his 40s stood up, holding a sketchbook. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I was one of the kids he helped. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him." Aaliyah's lips trembled. "Who are you?" "Marcus Dean," he said, his voice breaking. "He taught me how to draw, how to believe. I run the youth center now, the same one he started." Applause erupted, echoing through the hall like thunder. Aaliyah stepped down and embraced Marcus, tears falling freely. And in that moment, Malcolm's light, the one that had started with a mop and a quiet conversation, burned brighter than ever. The hidden letter after the ceremony. Aaliyah returned to her grandfather's old office, preserved just as he had left it. Dust motes floated through beams of sunlight. His desk was neat, a cup of pencils still sharp, a small model of the first center resting beside a faded photograph of Evelyn. Then she saw it, an envelope taped under the drawer, yellowed with time. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. On the front, in his familiar looping handwriting, were 3 words, "For when you're ready." She sat down, heart racing, and opened it. Inside was a letter, written decades ago. "My dearest, if you're reading this, it means the world kept moving, like it always does, and I hope you found something worth standing for. The truth is, I never meant to change the world. I just wanted to be kind in a place that forgot how. If you ever wonder where to begin, don't wait for the right time or the right people. You start right here. You build from love, even when it hurts, and you'll see that's how miracles begin." Malcolm Green Aaliyah pressed the letter to her heart, tears falling onto the ink. That night, she sat alone in the empty hall, the city lights flickering outside. She whispered the same words her grandmother had said long ago, the words that had started everything. "Do you think we could start right here?" And in her heart, she heard the answer, quiet, steady, familiar. "We already did." 3rd, full circle. The next morning, Aaliyah stood at the site of a new project, an empty lot on the city's west side. The neighborhood was struggling, much like the one her grandfather had once walked through years ago. But this time, she wasn't alone. Marcus stood beside her, along with a group of kids carrying sketchbooks and paintbrushes. "So," Marcus said, smiling, "what's the plan?" Aaliyah unfolded an old, worn blueprint, the first one Malcolm had ever drawn, preserved carefully through the years. His handwriting filled the corners, notes scribbled with care. Light here, open space for children, garden for peace. She smiled. "We're building this!" Exactly as he dreamed it. The children gathered around, eyes wide with excitement. "Can we help?" one asked. Aaliyah knelt down, smiling warmly. Of course, because that's what he would have wanted. As they began to draw, dig, and dream, laughter filled the air, mingling with the hum of the city. The cycle continued. The legacy lived. A single act of kindness, one woman seeing a man others overlooked, had sparked a fire that would never go out. Fool. The final message years later, when Aaliyah's own daughter asked about the story behind their family's work. She smiled and said, "It started a long time ago. A man cleaned an office every night and one woman asked him a question, a small question that changed everything." "What did she say, Mama?" She said, "Do you think we could start right here?" The little girl tilted her head. "And did they?" Her mother smiled, gazing out the window toward the skyline lit by hundreds of youth centers and gardens, symbols of hope. "They did. And now it's our turn." Closing scene. The camera would pan upward, from the children's laughter to the city skyline glowing under a warm golden sunset. Murals of Malcolm and Evelyn stretch across walls, reminders. The change doesn't come from power or wealth, but from small moments of courage. A soft voice narrates over the fading light. One man picked up a mop. One woman looked past a label. Together they built something eternal. Because the greatest revolutions don't begin with speeches. They begin with kindness, and they start right here,